Hi, my name is Rachel, and today I'm going to be talking about two different books, both of which are called Blackout. So somehow, for some reason, some idiot doesn't know who Danielle Clayton is. More than one idiot, actually. I'm going to leave a link down below to Jess Owen's video from Book Community explaining that people have twice in 1 week put up someone else who is not Danielle Clayton and said, hey, this is Danielle Clayton. So Blackout was recently featured on the indie bestseller list, and the authors are Danielle Clayton, but also Nick Stone, Tiffany D. Jackson, Ashley Woodfolk, Nicola Yoon, and I'm remembering this off memory, and Angie Thomas, all of which are phenomenal authors. So they got together and they did this anthology called Blackout, and it ended up on the indie bestseller list. However, whoever put together this list put the name correctly, but put Candace Owens' book featured instead of Danielle Clayton's. So, besides the name, I wanted to read both and ask the question, what do these books have in common? Oh no, oh no, oh no, 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 no. And I wanted to know, why would somebody mix up these two books? The answer is, besides the name, the two of them have nothing in common, and there was absolutely no excuse for somebody doing this. Whoever did it, an absolute dumbass. But this is a booktube channel, and I try to talk about books that people are currently talking about, whether they're currently talking about the book itself or issues surrounding the book, so here we are. So both were on Scribd, and I checked them out. Both audiobooks are exactly 6 hours long, so that was an interesting also coincidence. Beyond that and the name, literally nothing else in common. So Blackout, the first one we'll talk about, is an anthology book featuring 6 stories by 6 incredible authors. As I said, Danielle Clayton, Nick Stone, Nicola Yoon, Tiffany D. Jackson, Ashley Woodfolk, and Angie Thomas. And this book is a short, fun summary read that really felt like a movie. It'll give you similar feelings and vibes as New York, I Love You or Valentine's Day, where it's like interwoven stories and it's kind of like heartfelt. It's really just about young Black love, including queer Black love, and it's set over the course of one night with these interwoven stories surrounding a blackout in New York City. So the lights go out and everybody has to deal with, you know, that in the different environments they are with the different people they're with. It really is just a celebration of young Black love. It's really sweet. I think this would be perfect for people who are trying to dip their toes into a couple things. First of all, anthologies. I think that anthologies work best when they are done like this, where they're all set around a commonality similar to oh shit, what's that one anthology? I just read it a few months ago. Hungry Hearts. They're all set around the same neighborhood called Hungry Hearts Row. I liked this one, Blackout, much better because it focuses not just in a general area but on a specific experience, which is the blackout. Having that commonality really creates a sense of cohesion, and it's just, I really like that about it. I think it also would be good for somebody who's trying to try out YA contemporary romance, somebody who wants to dabble, because you're getting like several cute little shorter stories with romances with like a variety of personalities and situations and tropes, so you can kind of figure out what you do and don't prefer within the context of like YA contemporary romance. So this was, oh my gosh, it was whimsical and charming and really vibrant, and it explores different themes and different sorts of relationships within each story. And I think all of them were so well done. Each of them really had something to offer that was unique and just excellent. And each author's, speaking of uniqueness, each author's unique voice really came through. I have not read Ashley Woodfolk before this, and I started a Nicola Yoon book, but I haven't finished it, but I think I've read from Nick Stone. I don't know. Oh boy. I probably should have put that in my notes before I started that sentence. Anyway, the point is, it can be really difficult in anthologies to create a sense of cohesion when you have such different voices, but here they really work together, and each author's authorial voice really shines through and is distinct, but also it just, there's a great sense of cohesion here. One of the stories was called A Long Walk, and that was the one by Tiffany D. Jackson, and it's actually separated into several parts. So you start with it, and there's a couple in the middle, and then you end with it. And this one, it was my favorite. I really liked that it was interspersed. I liked that you start and end with those characters. Though I found something to love in each of the stories, this really ended up being my favorite. I just like really related to the anxiety rep in this one, and also at the end, after all of the conversations, this is about a couple who was previously together, who's no longer together, and they're sort of having conversations about that, and at the end and I audibly said, "Aww," which is very rare for me. I really loved that. She made me feel things. This is not even the first Tiffany D. Jackson book I read this month, so once again, just her making me feel things. Thank you, Tiffany. I appreciate you. You're doing the Lord's work. It was just a really wholesome and heartfelt story, and I loved that about it. One of the other favorites I had features a few teens who are heading to NYC for a school trip, and the thing I really appreciated about this particular one was it featured the healthiest breakup that I have ever seen. And I think that that is so incredibly important for youth to see depicted in media. Not just the amicable breakup, but also the conversations surrounding it, where it's like, you are allowed to put yourself first, you are allowed to explore different relationships in your life, you are allowed to come back to relationships. Just make sure you're prioritizing yourself. I think that that's huge. That's really promoting self-love, which teens need to hear more. And I can't tell you how much I appreciated the author for making that story. And the other great news about this existing is that we just found out a few days ago that the Obamas are actually going to be adapting it for both TV and film, and that is awesome. I am really looking forward to seeing that. So 5 out of 5, highly recommend, highly recommend. So let's talk about the other Blackout. Honestly, I would rather have re-experienced the last time I got blackout drunk and I ended up eating a bunch of dinosaur chicken nuggets at my in-laws' house and then throwing up in their bathroom. Or the time after that I got blackout drunk and ended up crying and saying I wanted to go home and be with my sister. I would rather re-experience those things than ever read anything from Candace Owens ever again. In Candace, conservatives have found something they love. So conservative people on the right love Candace Owens. People in my family who are conservative reference her whenever they're trying to make a point. In them, they have found a black person who is telling them exactly what they already believe and validating them, and thus they tokenize her. And they use her as their confirmation bias. They're like, "Oh, I'm not racist. See, I agree with Candace Owens." And it's like, that's not how that works.
I just want to say happy Juneteenth to everybody who is celebrating Juneteenth and is super upset that I think it's stupid. Happy Juneteenth. Amazing. Woo, feels good. Racism's gone now, right? You got your Juneteenth. I'm so happy. I mean, everybody in the entire history of the world has been a slave, but only one group of those people needs a holiday as a consolation prize from Democrats at the same time that there's, I don't know, anything they could solve. Shootings are up 94%, homicides, this city, that city, but at least they gave you Juneteenth. More power to all of you. I'll be celebrating the 4th of July, but I don't know, maybe next year we can do another baseless holiday.
A good way to find out if somebody who you love who's conservative is dealing with some bias that they need to work out is to go and look through their Instagram and find out if they're following Candace Owens, and then see if they're following like literally any other people of color. It's a good exercise in seeing just how conservative your loved ones are. Let's see what else. And this is not to say that Candace Owens has no experience with racism as a black woman. She absolutely does. In fact, she grew up in Connecticut. My family's from Connecticut. She grew up in Connecticut, and the Stanford school district that she actually successfully sued them for racism and got like tens of thousands of dollars because she was treated like crap for being a black woman, and she rightfully sued them. She doesn't talk about this much anymore, but yeah, I think that it's pertinent because racism does exist, and Candace Owens herself has experienced it, despite trying to now say the opposite. Now she sort of panders to white America for money, and that sucks to watch, because watching them like tokenize her, watching like people that even I'm related to tokenize her is disturbing. So in the foreword of this god-awful book, she says the real threat to black Americans is illegal immigration, and then says like 2 seconds later, we're being taught to hate people. Candace? Oh boy. She says the numbers show that white supremacy is not a problem that's harming black America, and instead wants the government to focus on real issues, such as to keep fathers in black homes. I'm going to talk about more of that about what? I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, and that we need less government and more God. How religion is somehow a substitute for government structure is a fucking mystery to me. She says socialism is somehow a threat to every American, and even though the United States military is heavily socialized, and Candace would never advocate for less government military spending, she says that socialism is a threat to every American. So that seems contradictory, but okay. Fire departments, libraries, police, public schools, these are all socialized things. So just saying. I don't think those are a threat. So, I mean, if you think that the fire department is more of a threat because it's socialized than actual fires itself, that's on you. All right, let's talk about the keep Black fathers in homes thing. So in the foreword of this book, Larry Elder is featured. So he wrote the foreword. He is another Black conservative man, and he is very, very popular. I believe he works with PragerU, which is not an actual university. They make targeted content to try to turn people into conservatives. They have a very incorrect video about critical race theory, all kinds of other shit. They're so full of shit. They're not a university. They're just an online, an entity to turn people conservative. And he talks again about this in the foreword, and this is a common conservative talking point based on misrepresenting data. So they say that Black people's problems are a result of growing up in fatherless homes. And how do they find out whether or not people grow up in a fatherless home? So if you're going to look at data, look at how the data was taken, right? And the way that this data was taken is they assume that if a couple is unmarried, that equates to growing up in a fatherless home. It doesn't. So technically, under this idea, I would have been said to grow up in a fatherless home. And this is not a new argument. This has been an idea that has been weaponized against Black Americans for literally centuries. I'm going to reference a shit ton of Angela Davis because Freedom is a Constant Struggle is the fucking book. It is the book. Everybody should read it. The book. Angela Davis says, what was so exciting about the gay rights movement, I promise this is relevant, during its feminist phase, I would say, was its critique of marriage, especially since the institution of marriage was used in an ideologically oppressive way against Black people during slavery, and then later, you remember when Bush argued that what people need is to get married? For Black people, all they need to do is get married, and then suddenly all their problems were going to disappear. I'm not sure if that's in reference to George Bush or his son, but both were presidents, so. And honestly, they both probably believe it and still believe it, so great. When I say critique of marriage, I'm not talking about a critique of relations of intimacy and emotional connections and the ties that we feel with the people with whom we would like to spend our lives. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the institution as a capitalist institution that's designed to guarantee the distribution of property. I have questions about this idea that Black fathers somehow equate to better lives for Black Americans. What exactly about a piece of paper declaring a marriage magically equates to better outcomes? What exact mechanism is at play here? I wish they would say, but all they do is reference data wrongly. They get this idea from marriage statistics. So your parents being unmarried does not mean that you grow up fatherless, but that's where they're getting this statistic. Being unmarried, fatherless can mean different things to different people. So at what point is a child fatherless, like completely without a father? Does that mean they only see their father once a week, twice a week, only on the weekends, once every other month? What if their dad works overseas? What if their dad is a person who travels for work regularly, like a trucker? Your dad works night shifts, so you don't see him. At what point is a child actually fatherless? These are things that are not counted in the data. They just go by marriage statistics. Who's married and who's not. Whoever is not married, the children are growing up fatherless. And that's just not accurate. None of this is taken into account when this data is calculated. But even if it is true that Black children are growing up without present dads or with less present dads, by what exact mechanism, again, is this causing bad outcomes? Why are we putting the weight of Black America solely on the shoulders of fathers being present? Like, what exactly is the mechanism by which they cure things? How are they solely responsible for systemic issues? This seems like scapegoating. It sounds like respectability politics. Larry Elder, again, who wrote the foreword, says that Democrats want Black voters to feel like victims to systemic/structural racism, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary that exists. And what evidence does he offer? Do you want to guess? You probably guessed. We had a Black president. How can systemic racism exist? This is so common. So common. It's so frustrating. That doesn't, like, I don't understand the thought process to get there, but they really feel that way. Like, people who are conservative really feel that way. How can racism exist? We had a Black president in the White House. Like we are working from two different planes of reality, it feels like. So the fact that Barack Obama was voted twice into office somehow makes it so that racism does not exist. This is a common belief held by right-wingers. Angela Davis says regarding this, although racist state violence has been a consistent theme in the history of people of African descent in North America, it has become especially noteworthy during the administration of the first African American president, whose very election was widely interpreted as heralding the advent of a new post-racial era. The sheer persistence of police killings of Black youth contradicts the assumption that these are isolated aberrations. Trayvon Martin in Florida and Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri are only the most widely known of the countless numbers of Black people killed by police or vigilantes during the Obama administration, and they in turn represent an unbroken stream of racist violence. I really think that that's important how she put that. Both official and extra-legal, from slave patrols to the Ku Klux Klan to contemporary profiling practices and present-day vigilantes, like the guy who killed Ahmaud Arbery. Many of the assumptions regarding the significance of Obama's election are entirely wrong, especially those that depict a Black man in the US presidency as the symbolizing of the fall of the last barrier of racism. But I do think that the election itself was important, especially since most people, including most Black people, did not initially believe that it was even possible to elect a Black person into the presidency. Larry Elder says that it's an insult to the generations of Black Americans from 2 generations ago to say that their struggles are the same as Black Americans now. And this is a straw man argument because nobody is saying that. The struggles are not the same, but struggles exist nonetheless. Practices and thought processes and systems that started as far back as slavery were not magically dissolved by abolition and the civil rights movement, although that is what American history basically teaches. Angela Davis says this about the subject: "We may not experience lynchings and Ku Klux Klan violence in the same way we did earlier, but there is still state violence, police violence, military violence, and to a certain extent the Ku Klux Klan still exists. I don't think this means that the civil rights movement was unsuccessful. The civil rights movement was very successful in what it achieved: the legal eradication of racism and the dismantling of the apparatus of segregation. The problem is that often it is assumed that the eradication of the legal apparatus is equivalent to the abolition of racism. But racism persists in a framework that is far more expansive, far vaster than the legal framework. Economic racism continues to exist. Racism can be discovered at every level in every major institution, including the military, the healthcare system, and the police. It's not easy to eradicate racism that is so deeply entrenched in the structures of our society. And this is why it's important to develop an analysis that goes beyond an understanding of individual acts of racism, and this is why we need demands that go beyond the prosecution of individual perpetrators, like police who kill individuals. W.E.B. Du Bois, who wrote about the abolition of slavery, pointed out that the end of slavery per se was not going to solve the myriad of problems created by the institution of slavery. You could remove the chains, but if you did not develop the institutions that would allow for the incorporation of previously enslaved people into a democratic society, then slavery would not be abolished. In a sense, what we are arguing is that the prison abolitionist struggle follows the anti-slavery abolitionist struggle of the 19th century. The struggle for an abolitionist democracy is aspiring to create the institutions that will truly allow for a democratic society." So Larry Elder continues on saying that Democrats don't want to talk about the fact that 1/3 of abortions are performed on Black women, which literally, Larry, this book is written by Dr. Willie Parker, also a Black man who literally performs abortion and does talk about this. You're just not wanting to talk about it, like, because you don't want to talk about abortion, because you're against abortion. Like, don't pretend that the Democrats are the problem. I mean, sometimes Democrats are the problem, but not here, not in this issue. He says that illegal immigration disproportionately hurts Black workers. This is another very common conservative talking point. Even Donald Trump himself has specifically used this in order to promote his stupid border wall. Treva Lindsay, who is an Ohio State University professor who teaches about race and gender, says that increasing the labor supply actually increases job opportunities in certain industries with sizable numbers of Black and Latino workers. She said a 2006 study conducted by the University of Pennsylvania found that an increase in the labor supply resulting from immigration could actually generate more employment in industries such as home construction and food production. Simply put, more demand for goods and services means greater demand for those providing goods and services. While a handful of these less than credible studies suggest that undocumented immigrants take jobs from US-born Black people and Latinos, existing data simply does not bear out a correlation between undocumented immigration and unemployment rates among US-born racial and ethnic minorities. So moving from the we literally are just in the foreword. I'm gonna spoil it for you now. I did not finish this book. I got to the end of chapter 1 and I had so much notes I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want to be filming like a 7-hour video debunking every other sentence that she says that her and Larry Elder said, so I quit after chapter 1. So we're gonna go through to the end of chapter 1 and then I'm done. Obviously I don't recommend this book, so yeah, if you want to cut out here, fine. It'll just be more of me debunking Candace Owens and referencing Angela Davis. So if you're good with that, let's continue. In chapter 1, she calls Abraham Lincoln Black Americans' great emancipator, says that Black Americans voted for him and that they were mostly Republicans until 50 years later during the Depression, and the Republican and Democratic parties of today are not what they were then. So I just find comparing 2021 to 1860 a little bit misleading. Also, I don't love the idea of continuously talking about Abraham Lincoln as if he were this like a great abolitionist, which he was not an abolitionist of slavery. Like, no. So Abraham Lincoln did not view like slaves as people worthy of being a part of white society. He mused that slavery was wrong, but also had ideas like, let's send Black people away so we don't have to deal with them anymore, because the problem is them just being here, not the racism of white people. So he was like, let's send them away, let's send them off to Liberia. So he made and executed plans to send Black people, slaves, away from the United States. So first he tried doing this in small doses to see if it would work, and at one point in 1862 he sent 450 Black slaves to Haiti, where a quarter of them died, and he outright said they died of malnutrition, and then the rest of them, the 3/4 that did not die, were sent back to the States. And he outright said, I can hardly believe that the South and the North can live in peace unless we get rid of the Black slaves. I believe that it would be better to export them all to some fertile country. So he's like, let's test that out, and then killed a bunch of them because of malnutrition. Like, this is your dude, this is your great abolitionist. And then he signs the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. Sure, but this was a war strategy. Signing it meant that Black men could enlist in the Union and fight. Like, having them join the army is not equality. So, like, calling him their great emancipator is yikes. In 2020, Candace, yikes. It's just a gross misrepresentation and perpetuation of whitewashed history, and I'm just tired of it. It's just not the correct version of events. That is the version of events we learn in school here, at least that's what they taught in our Christian school, but that's because it's an effort to whitewash history, to make us look like the conquerors, the victors, the good people, who just needed to learn a couple lessons along the way instead of the colonizers and people who are responsible for the massacre of others. Let's see, I haven't even touched on the fact that he is responsible for the genocide of Native Americans. Like, this is your dude? Okay. Candace says the Democratic Party offers promises to Black Americans in order to get elected, which I agree. It's the only thing we agree on, but I think that all politicians do this because our political system in the United States is broken. I mean, Donald Trump, who she loves, is absolutely guilty of this, but so is Joe Biden. So for her to make this entire book being like, voting Republican is the answer, is just, no, that's not it, Candace. She says the Democrats promote a victim mentality for Black people, and that Black Americans are shackled by voting for Democrats in the hope that government deliverance will happen. And then at the end of chapter 1, she says, I will explain how a radicalized push for feminism is both emasculating and criminalizing men who are needed to lead strong families. And here's where I realized that there's just no fucking way I could read the rest of the book. She made her antiquated opinions on gender very very clear when she decided to get all in a huff about a dude wearing a dress. She saw Harry Styles in a dress and said on Twitter, "There is no society that can survive without strong men. The East knows this. In the West, the steady feminization of our men at the same time that Marxism is being taught to our children is not a coincidence. It is an outright attack. A dress is an outright attack." Can you imagine? Bringing back manly men. Manly men is subjective, Candace. Gender is not a strict set of rules one must adhere to. Gender is not sex. Gender is a complicated set of social and cultural conventions that inform the way we relate to our bodies and each other and our interests. It is a construct. Constructs are created by social consensus, but they can also change with social consensus. Their meaning can change with social consensus, especially because of societies naturally evolving and changing over time. As society changes, our constructs, others of which include not just gender, but money and religion and fashion, and even things like physical constructed things like roads. All of these are constructs that change over time. And another tweet, she even went on as far as to say, terms like toxic masculinity were created by toxic females. Real women don't do fake feminism. Lots of women do fake feminism. You don't know what you're talking about. I have nothing to add on her thoughts on fake feminism beyond that. Honestly, Angela Davis has been working hard for decades to teach the masses. The fact that her incredible work has somehow passed over the heads of both Larry Elder and Candace Owens is a fucking shame. I can't stand Candace Owens. I'm already too familiar with her nonsensical views. So yeah, I quit her book at the end of chapter 1. I recommend this Blackout, not the other one, unless you like being fed a bunch of bullshit. But honestly, everything that's in these books is stuff that I've heard from Candace Owens before, either on her Twitter or in interviews on like stupid Facebook videos that she's done that all of the conservative white men in my life love. If you're interested in hearing what she has to say, you don't have to sit down for 6 hours and read her audiobook. You can just go on YouTube and look up Candace Owens and she'll spew the same old shit that she's been spewing for years. That's all I have for you today. Leave your comments down below. Let me know if you're interested in reading the good Blackout, not the Candace Owens one. Okay, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.